A man would disappear from a construction site that he was working on, and it would be years before he was ever discovered. Hello, true crimeers. This is the case of Eric Haider. Viewer discretion is advised. Eric Haider was born on June 9th, 1981 in Bismarck, North Dakota. He was actually born prematurely and born with heart issues. He had a heart murmur. He had to go through numerous surgeries. Eventually, later on, as an adult, they would put a pacemaker in him. And despite all of it, after all of it, he was still thriving and doing as good as he could possibly do. He was definitely someone who rose to the challenge, and he fought everything, medically speaking, and he came out on top. He would kind of become this extremely generous man. It was said that, like, while he had a physically weak heart, emotionally and mentally, he had like the biggest and kindest heart of anyone. This poor guy went through, I guess, several strokes in his early 20s, but he always pulled through, and he never let it scare him, and he still just wanted to take care of others as opposed to focusing only on himself. At the time of this story, he had a fiance, and everything was going wonderfully for him. Eric worked on a construction crew, and he had just recently started working with this crew. They were working on a construction site on May 24th, 2012. It was just a few days shy of Memorial Day, and it was right around the corner from his birthday. Despite him had just starting with this crew, the whole group of them, which consisted of 6 total people, would carpool to the construction site. So the morning of May 24th, 2012, Eric's mom would drop him off at the meeting location where the carpool started. And then she said, "I love you." He said, "I love you." They gave a kiss and goodbye. And he got out of her car and got into the co-worker's vehicle, and they got to the construction site. Unfortunately, that would be the last time that Eric's mom would ever see him again. Typically, the end of the day would be around 6 p.m., and Eric's fiance was supposed to pick him up at the meeting point around 6:30 p.m., but he wasn't there at 6:30 with the other guys. They had basically told the fiance that Eric must have left the construction site sometime in the afternoon because they couldn't find him sometime after lunch. Reportedly, Eric still kept to himself. He didn't mingle too much with the other coworkers. He kind of just did his job. So they said they went to lunch sometime around 12. Eric's fiance spoke to Eric on the phone at 12:04 p.m. that day. She said he seemed great. Nothing was out of the ordinary. He wasn't upset or anything like that. He was just his normal self. 15 minutes after that, the crew got back from lunch, and they said Eric was nowhere to be seen. The foreman of the job site said that Eric was, at that time, he was a little upset because he had requested time off for the Memorial Day weekend, which apparently he was denied. So the foreman thinks that he got fed up with the fact that he couldn't take the time off. He must have just stormed off the construction site, never to come back again, thinking he just found a way home. Eric's family said there is zero chance in hell that he would ever do that because Eric was not someone to quit. He has put up with a lot in his life, and he never gave up. He never quit, especially over something as silly as vacation time. He was actually a father to 2 kids at the time, and he was 30 years old, and he would never leave a job because he wanted to make sure he could support his children, support his fiance, support himself. So the family just wasn't believing this story that he just stormed off. So after Eric hadn't been home that entire day. The next day, they obviously kept trying his cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail every single time. Eric just sort of fell off the face of the earth. So they reported him missing to police. Police, they then go to the construction site. They interview all of his coworkers, the foreman. They all say the same story, that Eric was sort of this quiet guy, kept to himself. He was upset about the vacation thing. And they again said, well, he had to just storm off because he was gone after lunch. Around the time they got back from lunch, the crew had started filling in a whole bunch of, like, I guess, holes where they were putting new pipes. And Eric was supposed to be working in one of those holes near one of the pipes. So what police apparently did was they started to do like a basic search of the job site. They brought in like cadaver dogs, and at first they didn't pick up anything. But police would eventually get a warrant to start digging up in areas where the construction crew said he would have been, because maybe he got buried under some dirt. They dig in those areas, they come up with nothing. It's a pretty extensive search, they say, and they don't find him. They don't find any trace of him. They don't find a cell phone, clothing, nothing. He's not there. Eric's mom and fiance, they had a very hard time believing this story still. They really felt in their hearts that Eric was somewhere on that job site. But police, they did their due diligence, they dug, and they just couldn't find him. And they, were digging where the construction crew said he was. So he had to have walked off the job site. But again, they're like, no, he didn't. He's got to be there. But, they put out information to the public to, see if you've seen this man, please, contact us. If you have any information, contact us, because they were at a loss. They were at a standstill. They couldn't find him on the job site, couldn't find him anywhere else. They couldn't ping his cell phone because it was shut off somewhere. They didn't know what to do. That is until about 3 years later, on May 21st, 2015. There was a construction crew doing some new work at the same site where this all went down 3 years prior. When someone found out that they were doing some like excavation work for piping there again, someone had asked if they could bring in their own like cadaver dog, not like a police one. So they say that's fine. And then the cadaver dog, I guess, now does find a hit. And they called it an unofficial hit because it wasn't like a police sanctioned thing. So they then get the police involved, and they start digging in this area where the dog was, where it hit. 6.5 feet under the earth, and roughly just 10 feet away from where police had dug 3 years prior, they find a body. The body was not fully decomposed because it had been it was buried pretty deep. So there was still some distinguishable aspects to the body, including tattoos. And then the clothing items that he was wearing all matched Eric. They also found his cell phone right next to where he was. His construction hat was apparently kind of like his face was in it. They said he was in a kind of a squatting position, but sort of fallen over a little bit. Almost as if they say that he was either standing in this hole or kind of in a squatting position when someone dumped a bunch of dirt that was so forceful, it would have knocked him down or over. They were not able to determine the exact cause of death, however. There was no signs of like physical trauma. So the conclusion they came to is that he was, unfortunately, probably buried alive. He had a pacemaker, and the pacemaker basically said his time of death was 12:19 p.m. on May 24th, 2012. This was just about 15 minutes after he spoke to his girlfriend, while the construction crew said they were at lunch, is when he died. So it's a little It's a little sketchy. The construction crew's story seems a little off. Where they told police to dig seemed a little off. It all seemed a little fishy, especially to Eric's family. However, because they cannot prove there was any criminal wrongdoing, they unfortunately had to declare this case as closed. Not necessarily solved. Police aren't saying they don't believe foul play was involved. They just don't have any probable cause. They have no evidence to suggest that he was actually murdered. His family, especially his mom, believes that something bad happened to him at the expense of someone else's doing. But no one can prove it. The investigators, they did a thorough investigation into the construction crew, but unfortunately, there may never be an actual conclusion to this in terms of knowing exactly what happened right around 12:19 p.m. on May 24th, 2012. All we know is that Eric was likely in a hole working on a pipe, and he was buried alive by a whole bunch of dirt. How that dirt got on top of him, how nobody noticed, how nobody thought to look when they said they know he was digging in a hole, that's a whole different story. But unfortunately, no one is being held responsible at this time. But Eric's family, especially his mom, are not going to give up until they have the answers they want. And I hope they find the answers. Because if someone is responsible for it, someone needs to be held responsible for it. Even if it was an accidental thing. At this point, if it was accidental, someone probably knows and they're probably trying to cover it up. So there's issues there too. Eric has left behind 2 children. His teenage daughter is still in mourning, and she just wants answers like everyone else because she's now without a father, and she just wants to know why. If by chance you have any information about the mysterious death of Eric Haider, you can contact the Dickinson Police Department. That number is 701-456-7759. And perhaps you can help get his family some closure. That is it for this case. Let me know what you think. And we will see you for the next video, which will be tomorrow. So yeah, please subscribe if you're new, and we will catch you on the next vid. Vid isn't a thing, Mike.